Peace. This is Jamal Robinson with 720astrology.com. Today's date is March 21st, 2024. At the time of recording this, it's 10:54 a.m. Central Standard Time. Let's talk about the upcoming full moon and lunar eclipse, which will occur on March 25th, 2024 at 5 degrees of Libra. I want to talk about some of the themes that are surrounding this full moon and give you some tidbits to think about and reflect on so you can get the most out of it and experience the most empowered forward movement relative to this full moon and lunar eclipse. The full moon in itself raises the tension in the blood. It causes the waters on the planet and in the body to increase. Carl Jansky, a very erudite astronomer and astrologer of the 20th century, talks about this in his book on eclipses. And he theorizes that maybe one of the reasons people tend to act out during an eclipse is that the skull does not expand. So this creates tension. So when there is a full moon, that can tend to force people to act crazy, for lack of better words. When we have this eclipse, a lunar eclipse, not only do we have an increase in water, which increases tension, which means things come to light, things bubble up in our blood and drive us to do things. There can be this hormonal push because of this increased activity in the blood. But at a lunar eclipse, it's like the full moon on steroids. So it is bringing something to our attention and at the same time closing out a cycle and opening the door to a new cycle. Now, this should not be interpreted negatively. And I know the way I have set this up may come off negatively at first, but it's not. In essence, everything is good. It's all good because everything is ordered, even chaos. One thing about astrology it teaches us is that even in chaos, because as time goes on, we're going to keep uncovering new cycles in astrology. And every time we arrive at the discovery of a new cycle, we're finding new evidence of order. So that what something that may have appeared as chaotic at one time, when it cycles back around, the mere fact that there is a cyclical nature denotes some type of order. And that's the great paradox of this existence. The zero itself is the sign of no thing. It symbolizes no thing. And to be not a thing is to be chaotic. I mean, everything can exist at once if it's not a thing. But what's interesting is that the zero also is the circle, the cycle, which gives us a start point and an end point. That in itself denotes order. So chaos and order are one and the same. And every time we can discover a cycle, we have this realization. So when we're looking at this full moon, which is also a lunar eclipse, we're getting another glimpse of the divine wisdom behind this whole tapestry that we live within. That in all chaos, even when something may be appearing to come to an end, a painful end in some instances, it is all working towards the good as in some form of divine order. And many times in life, what is the most bothersome thing is the fact that we don't know why something's happening and we because it seems to not be orderly. It just seems to catch us off guard and it doesn't make sense and my world is crashing and crumbling down. I'm having a tower moment. Dark night of the soul. It can't get no worse than this. And sometimes just that feeling that I don't know why is the most troublesome. It's more troubling than the actual events that are occurring, the ponderance over why. So there can be peace and understanding that even in these calamitous situations, there is some purpose, there is some order. Let's pull up the chart and let's start talking about this full moon eclipse, lunar eclipse at 5 degrees of Libra on March 25th. So the time set here is for the exact time of the full moon is 2 a.m. Central Standard Time. The sun and moon are at 5 degrees, 7 minutes of Libra and Aries, respectively. There's the moon, there's the sun, and here they are forming their opposition, which is what gives us the full moon. The sun is shining its light on the moon, it's illuminating the moon. So, this is where we feel a certain way about what we have seen or what has been revealed. The waters have swelled. There is inflammation that denotes tension. The opposition aspect in itself is of the nature of Saturn, and Saturn creates tension, and this can make people snap. But let's dive deep into this full moon and lunar eclipse to make sense of it all. First thing we notice is that we have what's called a bucket. We have what's called a bucket in the sky at the time of the lunar eclipse. And the bucket chart pattern is when we have 9 of the 10 planets bunched up in one hemisphere or area, and we have the 10th opposing that bunch. And that 10th here, which would be the moon, is like forming the handle of a bucket. And so we know that the contents of the bucket are dependent upon the handle to carry them where they need to go. So in this chart for the full moon, the moon is the handle. So this gives even more puts even more emphasis on the importance of the moon in at this time. The moon is the star of the show. Now, one thing to think about with this aspect, with the moon being the handle of the bucket, meaning all the stuff that it's carrying, all the other 9 planets, they're dependent on how we interpret things at an emotional level to move them where they need to go. We're talking about subconscious, Pluto, action, Mars, steadfastness, Saturn, attraction, love, Venus, dissolving, fusion, spirituality, Neptune, sense of self, expression, outward expression, Sun, communication, learning, Mercury, philosophy, big picture, abundance, Jupiter, and maverick, rebellion, and enlightenment, Uranus. Those are dependent on how I am interpreting my life. How do I feel? How am I receiving life? The moon, because the moon is the handle of this bucket. Now, if the handle is broken, then it's best to not try to pick it up anyway and carry this bucket, because there is a chance that you'll spill the contents of the bucket. All these valuable contents, you don't want to spill them and scatter them. So we got to focus on how well this handle is constructed. Is it properly attached to the bucket? And this metaphor is for our emotional health, our emotional intelligence, how we are responding, how we are being fed by life, and how we are feeding in response. It's easy to say that relationships may be coming to an end, and some are. Some are. I know of a relationship that involves a Libra, where leading up to this full moon, this marriage is dissolving because the wife filed for divorce. So it can be that literal. Libra is marriage, and it involves a Libra, and divorce proceedings, the initial steps are underway. But it's more than that. We don't want to be lazy in our delineation of the astrology and just stop at the fact or stop at the assumption that because this is a south node eclipse, that maybe this is a whole bunch of relationships are concluding or ending at this time, which there probably will be a whole bunch. But there's more that we need to glean from this. 5 years ago, I did a musical project called Early New Dawn, acronym END, Early New Dawn. And the acronym is of course, we're trying to play on words here. It's the end, but it's really the beginning. The end is really an early new dawn. With that in mind, that the end is an early new dawn, here's some things to think about this regarding this full moon eclipse in Libra. This doesn't have to be the end of a relationship. It can be the end of a cycle within the relationship. This can be the end of an attachment to an old relationship, including the wounds left behind from it. In other words, this can be a time for release and healing. this is a South Node eclipse. So am I still emotionally clinging to something from the past? Am I still emotionally attached to a past relationship? Do I need to cut that cord? In addition to that, am I still attached to the wounds and the pain of something that happened in a past relationship that has formed me and has created a reality, a subconscious program that I'm running? This is ultimately an assessment of self and the reflection in the mirror, because opposing Libra is Aries, the sign of me, the seed, myself, my I am. So when we have a full moon, the sun is shining its light on the moon, and the moon is only reflecting what the sun is giving it. So the result of my relationship life and past and future is contingent upon the quality of my seed, of my I am. Taking that a step further, this can be an opportunity to release outmoded thinking about relationship as an institution. We need to possibly, if we're guilty of this, stop making sweeping judgments about the opposite sex, because there's a lot of that online. There's a lot of divisiveness. Stop making sweeping judgments about men. Stop making sweeping judgments about women based on what you have magnetized to yourself through your past relationships. Relationship as an institution is Venusian, it's Venus. And Venus is associated with copper. Copper is a conduit. So copper brings energies together. It commingles energies. It attracts. So don't make your judgment of the opposite sex based on what you have magnetized to yourself. In some form or fashion, you attract what you are, how you feel about yourself, and based on how you present yourself. I want to say that one more time. You, I, all of us, we attract based on what we are, how we feel about ourselves, and how we present ourselves. That's how we attract. So, whatever the condition of relationship has been in the past, which may have shaped our now, we have to take responsibility for it. And that's a lot of what this full moon eclipse may be bringing to the surface, that I'm responsible for my relationship life. So ultimately, I'm looking at myself. This whole cycle, this nodal axis in Aries and Libra is about self-reflection, self-assessment. It's about insight before expression. Now let's look at some key aspects that are occurring at the same time of the full moon eclipse, which will help shape our experiences. For one, we have Pluto is in a semi-square to Venus. So this could be an uncomfortable truth or previously hidden secrets that come to light. This can be control issues or victimization, abuse, compulsion. Some of the themes that may come to the surface could be an initial warning of something that can become more acute in May. Why? Because in May, Venus will form a first quarter square to Pluto. And as I talked about previously in another video, that this relationship between Venus and Pluto is especially important this year because those two will meet up. They will complete their cycle in December. So we want to go back and analyze what was going on in our lives in February. And we want to especially track this cycle. What comes up now that may be a warning sign, with the understanding that ultimately Pluto is about truth, but it's not a surface truth. It is a deep truth. It's a truth at a root level, soul level. So what whispers are coming from my soul that may be reflecting in relationship, Venus, at this time, that may be reflected in my sense of value, that may be reflected in my resources? Is something beckoning me to dig deeper? Am I being too superficial? Things to think about right now. Venus is at the time of the eclipse. Venus is separating from Saturn, but it's still in range of conjunction. So those two are conjunct and they are in a sextile with Jupiter. So here's that flip side in astrology. While we got that hard aspect with Pluto that's telling us we got to get down to the truth, there's still opportunity. So what does that mean? Because you got Venus and Saturn is a taskmaster. Saturn is about responsibility. Saturn is about endurance. So when those two get together, there's a seriousness. There may be a feeling of limitation. It also can be a feeling of a drive to accomplish and the willingness to exert the will. So with this aspect between Venus and Saturn in sextile with Jupiter, if you've been operating in truth and exercising discipline, then this could be an opportunity for growth. Jupiter is growth, Saturn is discipline, and Venus is love, resources, attraction, gifts, Venus. We have another hard aspect that's formed on the at the time of the eclipse, and it is Mars in a semi-square to the North Node, and it's approaching a semi-square to Chiron. We'll go ahead and include those. So the North Node and Chiron. So Mars is part of a four-planet stellium at this time in Pisces. Pisces, the energy of dissolving spirituality, of fusion, sensitivity. So Mars always wants to go, but right now Mars may not be sure where to go. Destiny is calling, but I'm not quite sure how to get there. So this can be some frustration because the North Node is destiny. That's what destiny's calling. Now, Mars rules the North Node. So this can be quite frustrating to have destiny calling and it's like, hey, move, go forward, travel, go after it. But this very direct Mars energy, Mars rules over knives, things that puncture, knives, bullets, but those things don't have as much power when they're in water. It's not the same threat when you shoot a bow, when you have a bow and arrow in the water, or any other projectile, a gun, or you're trying to strike, because the water slows things down. It creates a degree of resistance. That's why Mars works very well in air, because it propels the projectile. So this can be frustrating. So at this time, there might be an uncomfortable push to have to trust, and to have to let go of the need to be very forceful and direct in movement at this time. Another hard aspect that we have is that the sun at 5 of Aries is in a semi-square to Uranus, which is at 20 of Taurus. So this can be an electric jolt that can cause angst and a feeling of agitation. Now you couple this with the fact that Mars is also in a semi-square, and Mars wants to act not tomorrow, not in a minute, but now. And then you have the sun coupled with Uranus in hard aspect. And this is like a lightning strike that might strike in the wrong place. So here's this electric jolt causing this angst and agitation. After all, I'm trying to get somewhere and I don't want nothing getting in my way. But let me be careful not to burn out the circuit. Let's be careful not to burn out the circuit and to not be rebellious just for the sake of being rebellious. Don't be a contrarian just for the hell of it. That's the challenge at this full moon eclipse. So these aspects can make it challenging right now at this eclipse to have clarity and to use reason and to be rational so that we can release things that are no longer suiting us. So we want to be careful not to allow agitation or impatience. And I know I say this a lot, but it's just like kind of like, again, it's like these themes keep playing out over and over in 2024, especially for me. I'm a very driven person, and we don't want the arrow to be slowed down in a big old pool of water, but it happens. So sometimes we have to lean on the trust and fidelity aspect of our psyche, to trust that all things are working for the good, that there is always order in the midst of chaos. This is challenging our ability to visualize the future, because this four planet stellium in Pisces, they will all eventually move into Aries, which Aries is a directive. Aries requires movement. It requires action. It's the opening of the way. And so now we have possibly the time we need to prepare to open the way. We're already crossed the vernal equinox. There's already a certain energy that is percolating, but that energy is going to continue to build. And by the time we get in May, we're going to have to be taking action. So maybe right now is the time for us to get our house in order. in preparation for May. And this full moon eclipse is a great lead up, because before we can act on the future, we must let go of things that are not suiting us. Let go of old baggage, let go of dead weight. And it appears that there might be challenges here around this eclipse that may be challenging our sense of resolve. When we say these things, do we really mean it? Do we really understand it? Are we prepared to pass on to the next level? Ultimately, I see this as opportunity, an opportunity for advancement. This eclipse, coupled with the solar eclipse that will occur on April 8th, which I will come back and talk about, I see these are signposts or doorways to the future. But in order to walk through that door and reap the full benefits, we're having to let some stuff go. And more than likely, it's at a psychological level more than anything else. It's at a soul level. It's at a spiritual level before it is a physical. Let go so that you can go and proceed. For private readings, I'm available through my website, 720astrology.com. Know the stars to know yourself. Peace.